Welcome in, everybody. It's the 2021 off season. We're a few weeks past the Dak Prescott contract announcement. And so, by and large, the media circus has kind of moved on and rolled on to other things, and it's left to nerds like me to kind of step back and look a little bit deeper at not only the Prescott contract itself, but what it might mean for other players. One of the things that really came up during the Prescott announcement was what a huge win this was for the players. And a lot of circles, this was celebrated as a win, not just for Dak Prescott, but as a win for all NFL players. And the image, the narrative goes something like this. You have the young quarterback with Prescott standing up to the establishment and specifically the older, aging, rich owner in Jerry Jones, and that Prescott won, which by all standards and measurement, Prescott himself did. But the narrative that goes along with that is that NFL players won, and that this is, maybe one of the first big wins the NFL players have had in a while. And that's the part that I really want to deal with. We're going to walk through the early parts of the Prescott contract today, and we're going to talk about the salary cap as well. But the ultimate drive of this video is to talk about whether or not NFL players actually won with this deal. And that's what I'm really trying to get at today. We plan to, as the summer goes along, have other videos on Dak Prescott, the contract, and everything with him specifically. But today, the question is, did NFL players actually win here, or was it a win for somebody else or somebody more specific than that? So let's talk about this first of all. This money right here is how much money is available in salary cap space in 2021. And that number is $182 million. For those of you who actually want to count it out, you're welcome to do so. But it's $182 million. It was going to be around 210, but of course, COVID hit. The fans weren't allowed to come to the stadiums. There was a pretty big impact on revenue. You still had TV revenue coming in, which is by far the largest amount of revenue for NFL franchises. But some of that was hurt, and so they cut the cap down to 182. The players' union agreed to do that with the owners for a litany of different reasons. That's the new number, 182. In 2021, Prescott's cap number out of that, so the amount of money that he's going to get out of that in 2021 is going to be $22 million. So I'm going to slide that amount over, and you can see how much of this money is apportioned just to Dak Prescott all by himself. And that number is $22 million. So you can see rather quickly, this is just in the first season. It's a backloaded contract. You can see very quickly how much money is given to Prescott. The rest is got to be divided among the other 52 players on the NFL roster. Okay, so they've got to split all this up. Now, this is the important thing to remember. The Dak Prescott and his agent, they did not force Jerry Jones to come up with more money than he otherwise would have came up with. What they forced him to do by waiting and by him still wanting Prescott to be his quarterback, they forced Jones to give more money to Prescott than he wanted to give to Prescott, and also different number of years. There was some argument over the number of years that they wanted to give as well. What they didn't do is force Jerry Jones to dip deeper into his pockets and pay more for his players over the next 5 seasons than he was going to. This number did not change at all. The cap for the Cowboys is still $182 million, okay? And that's the point that I want to drive home here. There's not more money to spread around all of a sudden. By NFL rules, by the collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, which is what the players union and the NFL owners have agreed to for decades now. There's a limited amount of money that they can spend, and a rich owner like Jerry Jones isn't allowed to dip deeper into his pockets and say, hey, here's another $20 million I'm going to spend on the team this year so we can have a better team than anybody else. That's just simply not allowed. Okay, so the amount didn't change, and most of you know that. Most of you that already know that part of it. That's why you're watching a video like this. But here's the point. $22 million in 2021 goes to Prescott out of the 182. Now, in 2022, hang with me, we're going to do this for 3 seasons, okay? In 2022, assuming the cap, the COVID stuff all goes away, the overall cap, everything together, is going to grow by about $40 million to what it would have been in 2022 anyway, which is about $220 million, give or take $1 million. Now, I know every year somebody tells me, no, the cap's going to grow by $30 million, and it never has. The cap's going to grow by 17%, and it never has, okay? So if you've heard that on your friendly local talk radio show, just forget it. It is, they're pulling that out of their butt, basically, okay? That has never happened. It's not going to. In 2022, the cap is going to be somewhere around $220 million, okay? And that's the amount of money on the board. Out of that amount, Prescott, instead of making $22 million, is now going to be making $33 million, okay? Tuck that in. So in 2022, out of the $220 million available to the Cowboys to spend, or to any NFL team to spend, Prescott is going to be making $33 million of that. So you can see, even in a year where we're going to leap over the COVID cap and get all our cap space back 40, he's still getting a healthy amount of that, an additional $11 million. Same thing happens in 2023, and this is where I might get a little bit of argument from some people, but we're going to push back on it, okay? So hang on with me here. 2023, the cap should grow by about another $10 million, give or take a couple of million. We don't know for sure. That's 2 years away. Some TV contracts will start to kick in 2023, but about $10 million is going to get added to the salary cap in 2023. So it will grow to about $230 million, give or take a couple of million. Prescott's cap number in 2023 is going to grow to $44 million, which means he gets that $10 million right there, and he also gets an extra $1 million for his cap number for 2023 is now $44 million, okay? So in 2023, he is actually going to grow. His contract number is actually going to grow faster than the cap grew that season, okay? And that's not unusual for big contracts. Contracts this big. I'm not just picking on Dak Prescott. He's just the latest, most controversial contract that we have to talk about, okay? His contract is actually going to grow faster in 2023 than the cap is. Now, I'm going to get back to my ultimate point here in a minute, but I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, so let's go ahead and cover it, okay? In 2023, you're going to hear a lot of people talking about, and they're not going to know what they're talking about TV contract money hitting, and all that TV money, quote unquote, all that TV money is going to come crashing in, and player salaries are going to explode, and cap numbers like $44 million for Dak Prescott are going to seem small. And that's just not true, okay? Let's talk about why that's not true. The TV money that is going to kick in, it should start in 2023. It is going to grow slowly with each season. In other words, it grows by a certain percentage in 2023, then they're going to let it grow again in 2024. And what that does, it does this. It prevents a lean year from dipping the salaries back down again, and it prevents a big year from exploding. It allows everything to be more stable, if you will, okay? From one year to the next, it allows the salaries to grow by a certain percentage. It allows the cap to grow by a certain percentage. It allows teams' expenses to grow by a certain percentage. It just stabilizes everything. So you are not, more than likely, you are not going to see a massive, massive explosion of player salaries all of a sudden in 2023 specifically. You will see them grow a lot over the next decade, starting in 2023, but they've always done that. They've done that for the last decade, in which the player salaries continue to grow. They are always going to do that for the next 10 or 12 years, but it's not going to happen all at once in one season, okay? So when I talk about $44 million coming out of a $230 million cap in 2023, that's pretty darn close to what is actually going to happen, give or take a couple of $1 million. Now, Dak Prescott's winning, all right? We've seen that so far, okay? He goes from $22 million to $33 million to $44 million. Now, after 3 seasons, the Cowboys can get out of this contract if they want to. If he's not playing particularly well, or if he's playing decent but they're not winning, or if he's injured, they can get out of this contract for a relatively inexpensive dead cap hit in 2023 offseason, before the 2024 season, sorry, 24 offseason. They can get out of that. But if he plays again in 2024 for them, I think his cap number grows to $47 million. This is all assuming they don't restructure him. And then in 2025, I think it's somewhere right around that $47, $48 million mark again. So it's going to grow and grow and grow. And it may not hurt the cap too much in year number one when he's only making $22 million. But by year number two, you are really going to feel this contract. And by 2023 and beyond, it is really going to mushroom and explode. Okay, so it is a burden to the cap. And when you realize that the difference between mediocre NFL teams and bad NFL teams isn't all that great, you start to realize that, hey, $5 million a season or $10 million a season added on to one player's contract, and we have to use what's left for the other 52 players, and we've got to find 22 other starters, and we've got to have at least 10 other backups, and we're competing with 31 other NFL teams to spend those same amount of dollars wisely. You understand. Now, if something does happen in 2023, and I don't expect it to, it never has. I do not expect it to in 23, but if it did, keep in mind it happens for all NFL teams. So even if the Cowboys benefit from that and they have more than $230 million to spend in 2023, so does every other NFL team. Okay, so it's not like the Cowboys get an advantage, and it's not like they have some kind of a special deal. They still have the same amount to spend as everybody else would. Okay, so that's important. That's the important thing to remember here. Jerry Jones is not spending more on the team than he would have before. They didn't find some extra bit of cash here to cover Prescott's contract. They just decided we're going to give more to Dak Prescott and the number of years that he wants versus the amount that we were trying to give him 1 season ago and 2 seasons ago. So it's a win for Dak Prescott, no doubt about it. Here's the kicker. It is not a win for other NFL players. And this is one thing that really gets overlooked. If you want to frame this socially and publicly and put together some kind of a narrative where this is a win for the NFL players, I don't mind that on the social side, but when it comes down to money and when it comes down to brass tacks and the rubber meets the road and you're actually counting dollar bills, which we are going to do here today, this is not a win for NFL players, okay? This is a win for Dak Prescott, and it's another in a very, 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 very long and unending line of wins for above average NFL quarterbacks. And I'm not going to spend any time in today's video talking about how good or how bad Dak Prescott is. But any quarterback in the NFL who is even above average has continued to win these contract battles now for several years, okay? Whether it's Alex Smith for the Kansas City Chiefs and for the Washington football team, whether it's Kirk Cousins with Minnesota, or whether it's Jay Cutler a few years ago. Hey, I'd a whole lot rather give Dak Prescott this money than I would Kirk Cousins or Jay Cutler. But the point is, this is a very, very, very long list of above average quarterbacks who continue to get the amount of money they want based on what their agents are kind of allowed to ask for, and they're continuing to rack up huge amounts of money. Where does that money come from? This is the important question. This is the point of the whole video. It does not come from Jerry Jones dipping deeper into his pockets. It does not come from some little fund that's been set aside to fund special projects like Dak Prescott. It comes from the cap. And here's where I want to talk about. In the NFL, you basically have 3 classes of people. You could divide them into 4, but I'm going with 3 today. You have the upper class. These are the rich guys in the NFL. And basically, this is anybody who makes $12 million to $40 million a season. That's a wide financial spread. If you wanted to cut the upper class into 2 classes, which would be $12 to $20 million, and then you have the uber rich at $20 to $40 million, that's fine as well. But there's a certain amount of guys who really break the bank at their positions, and they make anywhere from $12 million a season to $40 million a season. The middle class is this group right here. They make $2 million a season to $12 million a season, okay? This middle class is nowhere near as big as it should be. I'll come back to that. The poor class, if you will, in the NFL, and poor here is a relative term, right? Because most of us would be more than happy to be making $1 million a season, right? But in NFL terms, the poor players, the poor class, and by far, this group makes up, I forget the statistics, I would have to go back and look it up, but it's somewhere around 2/3 of the NFL fits in this category right here. They are making about $1 million a season. Some of them are making $750,000 a season. Some of them are making $1.5 million a season. But by far, far away, most of the NFL is making about $1 million a season to play in the NFL before taxes. Okay, that's their cap hit. Now, here's the kicker. When players like Dak Prescott and other players too who are in this $12 to $40 million category, they don't get it from the owner's pockets because the owner is not allowed to spend any more than he would have spent anyway. They get it from the only place they can get it, and that's from this middle class right here. Okay? The middle class in the NFL is going to be making, not only, get this, not only are your middle class players going to be making less money per season, but in some cases, some of your veteran middle class players are going to have difficult times even finding a place in the NFL at all. Okay, those are the two things that start to happen. When Dak Prescott's cap number goes from $10 million on a fifth-year option or whatever it was, I don't remember, I'm not even sure if he got the fifth-year option, but when he goes from basically his rookie contract up to 22, up to 33, up to 44, and the same thing happens with other quarterbacks around the NFL or other top defensive players around the NFL or the top wide receivers around the NFL. That money always, every single time, comes from the only place it can come from, and that's the middle class. It cannot come from the poor people. So why can't it come from the poor people? There's so many of them. Couldn't you just kind of whittle that down? Most of them are already making the league minimum, either for a rookie for that season, or they are making the league minimum for a veteran for that season. So there is no money to be saved here with the poor folks. They're already making what is the agreed upon by the players union, by the owners. They are already making the agreed upon minimum. And you can't have fewer players than 53 men on the roster. You might say, hey, let's just put together a 22-man all-star team and we'll play those guys. Again, not allowed. You have to put together 53-man roster. So where does the money come from? Always it comes from this group right here. And here's what's happening. A lot of your middle-class players, and this may be your starting running back, this may be your second-best linebacker on the team, this might be your slot CB, this might be your slot wide receiver, you name it. A lot of these guys that could be making $7, $8, or $9 million a season, instead, because of these large contracts, instead they are making $4, $5, $6 million a season. The second thing that's happening in a lot of cases, we have seen the number of NFL teams that are using undrafted rookie free agents continue to grow. We are actually creating more poor people in the NFL, if you will. There are more and more guys in the NFL who are fitting that category right there, the $1 million category. The undrafted rookies, guys who are coming in from the 6th round, guys who are coming in as street free agents. We are seeing more and more of those guys right there. $1 million a season players, and that money is coming from the middle class, okay? So you have these guys here who really and otherwise should be making $2 to $3 million a season more, and there should be more of them per team. There are now fewer of them per team, and they are making less money on average per player. Those are the two things that you're seeing. So this is not a win for NFL players. Specifically, it's not a win for middle-class NFL players. You know, if you're a second tight end on the football team, or if you're the starting running back, or if you're the second-best linebacker on the team, or if you're a guard, or if you're a center, you are actually, over the past few seasons, as some of these quarterbacks really hit the major jackpots, and I'm not just talking about $15 million a season, I'm talking about $30 to $40 million a season, we are seeing these other players, middle-class players, if you will, it is coming out of their pocketbooks. And in that sense, very specifically, the sense that matters the most to me, it is a loss for most NFL players, okay? They are getting their pocketbooks hit, and in some cases, they're not even getting a roster spot at all because a lot of teams are just getting more undrafted rookie free agents to come and play for them. Okay, so those are the two things that are happening. So when you go back to the original question, is it a win for NFL players? No. Is it a win for Dak Prescott? Yes. Is it a win for above average NFL quarterbacks? Yes. Is it a win for the average NFL player? No, it's not. And they continue to kind of get the short end of the stick here, because every single dollar that you take because of the cap, every single dollar that you take and add on to one of the high-end players, it comes out of that pool of money, and it comes out of the middle class's pocketbook. Okay, I think we've covered that in depth. I think we've covered that enough. If you have more questions or if you have comments on that, feel free to jump in on it. But that's the important point of the day. I plan to, as the season goes along, if you want to have a separate discussion about how good Dak Prescott is, we'll try to have a video on that here in a few weeks. If you want to have another separate discussion on whether or not the Cowboys can compete for Super Bowls with Dak Prescott on a heavy contract like that, we will try to have that discussion as well over the next few weeks. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.